So cell respiration. Now this is a process where we're going to break down glucose for energy in the mitochondria. Now just don't forget that the plants have a chloroplast. They also have mitochondria because not only do they make it, they need to break it and get that energy. Okay. Now let's take a look. Cell respiration. We're breaking down the glucose. Glucose is a 6-carbon molecule, and once it's in the cell, by the way, this is a cell. You can see the phospholipid bilayer. Here's the cell, and here's the mitochondria. So glucose comes in, and immediately what we're going to do is break it down through glycolysis. Glycolysis means glucose split, and we split it right in half. So imagine an imaginary line right there, and what's left? Well, we're going to get 2 pyruvates. Again, each one is a 3-carbon molecule. And what happened there? Well, we produced NADH, which is we got some electrons out of this split and put the electrons that have a lot of energy onto NADH. And that energy also goes to ATP. So we made 2 ATP in total. And that's all right. It's not that much, though. But it's a basic first step that happens. Always we do stage 1 glycolysis. Now, 2 things can happen. It depends on oxygen availability. So if there's oxygen, we're going to go this route, and we're going to continue the breakdown of this pyruvate even further to make a maximum amount of 36 ATP. That's a lot, and that's why it's important to breathe in oxygen, because you can get a lot of ATP, 36. You also break down the glucose into carbon dioxide and water, as we already know. Now, if there isn't oxygen, then we go in this direction, which is called anaerobic respiration, which means without oxygen. It's also called fermentation. And you either produce ethyl alcohol if you're a plant, bacteria, or yeast, and lactic acid if you're a bacteria or humans or animals. So let's take a look a little bit more on this side. Why is this important? Well, if there is oxygen, we continue, pyruvate will enter the mitochondria and be broken down with oxygen. That's aerobic respiration, again, where we make 36 ATP. That's important. So when they tell you breathe in when you work out, that's important so that you can produce a lot of ATP, because you're able to break down the pyruvate further in the mitochondria. And that's why a person that's 150 pounds here can bench press up to 360 pounds of weight. Why? It's no magic trick. It's just this person's using science, knowing that if they breathe in a lot of oxygen, they're going to break down pyruvate fully in the mitochondria and make 36 ATP. It's a lot of energy to use. Also, again, soccer players know this trick. That's why when they train, they breathe in properly. And when they run, they breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, so they can get maximum oxygen. Same thing for those marathon runners. They know how to breathe. They train years and years on how to breathe correctly. So now, if there is no oxygen, again, let's go to the left side. And here we're going to break down pyruvate, and this is not in the mitochondria anymore. Notice we're out in the cytoplasm. So what happens is we break down pyruvate into ethanol. What do we get? We get some carbon dioxide, and ethanol is a form of alcohol. That's alcohol, right? And we also regenerate NAD+. This is important. Pay close attention here. NAD+ is important because once we make this process, as you notice, you don't make ATP here. Then what's the point of breaking it down further? Well, because we're going to make NAD+, and watch me right here. NAD+ is an important ingredient that helps us with this process of breaking down glucose. And remember what we do get here. We do get 2 ATP. So the point of doing this is that we regenerate NAD+, which can keep this glycolysis cycle going and making 2 ATP. Now that's at least something, right? That's energy without oxygen, so that's something. Okay, again, this is for plants, some bacteria, and fungi. Why is that important? Well, we cook with this stuff. We cook with fungi. And it's a very important one called yeast. So we bake with yeast. You put in yeast, you give it some sugar, and then you prevent any oxygen from going to it, and then it'll automatically ferment or go through anaerobic respiration, where it's going to break down that sugar to pyruvate, and then carbon dioxide, which is a gas coming out of the bread, making the bread rise and making holes in the bread, and also alcohol. So if you ever noticed and smell bread, it smells a little bit like alcohol, a little bit alcoholish. So that's that process there. Also, we use it to make wine. You get grapes, Usually that's what we use, grapes, and you smash them up, and then you add some sugar, and then you seal them tightly so that no oxygen goes into it. Why? So it can go through fermentation. So again, the plants will take the glucose, break it down into carbon dioxide and alcohol. Now, if you keep the carbon dioxide in there, it carbonates it, and so that's why you get champagne. But if you make a hole and allow only the carbon dioxide to leave, then that's when you just get the pure wine. Another way also to make beer, similar. Now, over here, this next process is, instead of making ethyl alcohol, our bodies don't do that, right? We don't make alcohol. We make acid in our bodies. And that's when, again, when you're doing some kind of exercise activity, you don't breathe in correctly, you don't have enough oxygen, then you're going to break down these pyruvic acids in the cytoplasm to make lactic acid. Now, again, you're making NAD+, so you're able to keep glycolysis going, and you're going to get 2 ATP, and that's okay when you don't have oxygen. But why can't we hold our breath too long, or why can't we continue doing high energy activities without enough oxygen? Well, because we produce lactic acid, and this stuff builds up in your cells, and what it does is start shutting down enzymes, and then you can't continue exercising. It also causes pain signals to the brain, and we feel muscle soreness. So eventually, if we keep doing this activity without oxygen, we're going to pass out, faint, we can even die, because remember, acid destroys enzymes. Remember, the shape won't be able to fit the substrate anymore, and so enzymes stop working, and then we die because reactions won't happen fast enough to keep us alive. So that's an overview of cellular respiration. Remember, the key idea is that we're breaking down glucose in this very first step. We break it down in half, called glycolysis. We get pyruvate, which 2 pyruvates. And then what happens next depends on if there's oxygen. If there's oxygen, we enter the mitochondria, and this is called aerobic respiration. The reactions in here are called oxidation reactions in the Krebs cycle. You don't have to know so much detail about that. Just know that that happens there, and we make a lot of ATP, which is great for all these things, right? But if we don't have oxygen, depending on what kind of creature we are, if we're plants, bacteria, and some fungi like yeast, they make alcohol. And if they're organisms like humans, or animals, or even some bacteria, then we go through making lactic acid. The most important part here is that we don't get ATP immediately, but indirectly, because the NAD+ that we generate will be used to keep glycolysis going for a while and making 2 ATP, which is something. And that's cell respiration.